Michael Carter never liked hospitals, but life as a single dad had trained him to tolerate places most people avoided. He had learned how to wait without complaining, how to sit still while anxiety quietly pressed against his chest. Waiting for test results, waiting for bills to stop piling up, waiting for life to feel less fragile. That afternoon, he occupied a hard plastic chair in the corner of a public clinic lobby, balancing patience and fatigue while helping his 8-year-old daughter, Emily, color neatly inside the lines of a worn activity book. Emily hummed softly as she worked, fully absorbed in choosing colors that made sense only to her. Michael watched her more than the page, noticing the way her brow furrowed with concentration, the way she stuck her tongue out slightly when she wanted to do something right. Moments like this grounded him. In places filled with uncertainty, children had a strange way of reminding adults that the present still existed, even when the future felt heavy and undefined. The waiting room itself felt suspended in time. Chairs scraped lightly against the floor as people shifted. A television murmured in the background, ignored by everyone. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and stale coffee. Faces around him told quiet stories of exhaustion, worry, and resignation. Some stared at the floor, others scrolled endlessly on their phones, hoping distraction might dull whatever they were waiting to hear. No one spoke unless necessary. Silence was safer here. Michael adjusted his jacket, suddenly aware of how long they had been sitting. He checked the clock on the wall, noting how slowly the minutes moved when hope and fear shared the same space. He reminded himself to stay calm for Emily's sake. She didn't need to feel the weight he carried. She deserved a version of him that felt steady. Even when he wasn't sure, he felt that way inside. Across the hall, near the reception desk, a woman stood alone. Michael noticed her not because she was loud or disruptive, but because she didn't sit. She remained standing despite the lack of space, clutching a thin folder tightly against her chest, as if it were holding her together. Her posture was controlled, deliberate, yet her shoulders were tense, betraying something she worked hard to contain. She shifted her weight slightly, careful, as though standing itself required effort. Her eyes moved constantly, scanning the room without really focusing on anyone. She looked composed, well put together, yet deeply uncomfortable, like someone trying to maintain control while something inside threatened to unravel. Michael recognized that look. It was the same one he had seen in the mirror during long nights when he thought no one was watching. A look shaped by responsibility, fear, and the quiet pressure of having to be strong. Emily glanced up from her coloring and followed Michael's gaze. She didn't ask questions, but she noticed the woman too. Michael felt an unfamiliar tension settle in his chest, a sense that the ordinary rhythm of the afternoon was about to change. He didn't know why, but something about the woman standing alone felt important. In a place filled with waiting, it felt like the moment before something quietly meaningful was about to begin. Sophia Lane stood near the wall, as if she had decided long ago that sitting was not an option. At 29, she carried herself with careful precision, her clothes neat, her hair pulled back with intention, every detail suggesting control. Yet beneath that surface, something was clearly unsettled. The waiting area was full, every chair occupied, but she didn't ask anyone to move. Instead, she leaned lightly against the wall, as though committing to the idea that discomfort was easier than drawing attention to herself. From time to time, Sophia shifted her weight, small movements meant to ease the strain in her legs. When she thought no one was watching, her expression tightened briefly, a wince crossing her face before she smoothed it away. She had mastered that reflex over years. Feel, then hide. Public places demanded that skill, especially places like this, where vulnerability seemed to float in the air, thick and unavoidable. Her eyes moved constantly, scanning the room again and again. She wasn't looking for an empty seat. She wasn't even looking for help. She was looking for safety, for signs of volatility, for reassurance that nothing around her was about to collapse. The way people sat, the tone of voices, the sudden opening of a door, she noticed everything. Anxiety had sharpened her awareness into something almost instinctive. A few people noticed her too. Their glances lingered just long enough to register her tension before pulling away. Some looked uncomfortable, others looked relieved that she wasn't asking anything of them. In waiting rooms, unspoken rules existed. You kept your distance, you minded your business, you avoided becoming part of someone else's story, because everyone feared how easily it could become their own. Sophia was used to that distance. She had learned not to challenge it. Asking for space, asking for understanding, asking for anything at all felt like crossing an invisible line. So she remained standing, absorbing the discomfort quietly, convincing herself she could handle it. She always did, or at least she always pretended to. Her grip tightened around the folder pressed against her chest. The papers inside felt heavier than they should have, as if the truth they contained added weight no one else could see. She kept them close, not wanting to risk dropping anything, documents or composure. Letting either fall apart in public felt unbearable. Time dragged on. The hum of conversation, the occasional cough, the muffled sound of names being called over the intercom, all blended into a dull rhythm. Sophia's breathing grew shallow, controlled, as though she were rationing air. She told herself she only needed to hold it together a little longer, just until she heard something, just until the waiting ended. Across the room, she felt eyes on her again, different this time, not curious, not uncomfortable, steady. She didn't look immediately, afraid that meeting someone's gaze might invite questions she wasn't ready to answer. But something about that awareness lingered, subtle and grounding, as if the room had shifted slightly. For the first time since she arrived, Sophia wondered if standing alone might not be her only option. After several minutes of standing in place, Sophia finally moved. The decision showed in the way she straightened her shoulders first, as if preparing herself internally before taking a single step. She crossed the waiting area slowly, carefully, stopping in front of Michael. Her presence was calm, deliberate. When she spoke, her voice was polite and controlled, almost rehearsed, as though she had practiced the sentence in her head more than once. She asked if she could sit for just a moment. Nothing more. No explanation followed. Michael looked up, caught off guard by the directness of the request. People rarely spoke to one another in places like this unless absolutely necessary. His eyes met hers, and in that brief exchange, he noticed something subtle but unmistakable. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the folder close to her body. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't obvious, but it was real. The kind of small detail that revealed far more than words ever could. He didn't ask why she needed the seat. He didn't look around to see if anyone else objected. He simply stood. The movement was quiet, unannounced, instinctive. He stepped aside and gestured gently toward the chair. The simplicity of it cut through the tension in the room more sharply than any conversation could have. Emily looked up from her coloring book, her eyes curious as she followed the exchange without fully understanding it. For a brief moment, Sophia hesitated. She hadn't expected immediate agreement. She hadn't expected kindness without conditions. Accepting the seat felt heavier than she anticipated, as if it required surrendering a piece of the control she had been clinging to. Then she nodded, murmured a soft "thank you," and sat down carefully, her body lowering as though the act itself demanded more strength than she wanted to admit. The chair creaked slightly under her weight. Sophia exhaled slowly, deliberately, like someone who had been holding their breath far longer than they realized. She kept her posture upright, her knees together, her hands folded in her lap. Even seated, she remained guarded, as if sitting was temporary, something she had to justify. Still, The tension in her shoulders eased just enough to be noticeable. Michael remained standing beside Emily, resting one hand lightly on the back of the chair. He felt no regret, only a quiet certainty that he had done the right thing. He had learned long ago that moments like these didn't require logic, they required awareness. Emily glanced between the two adults, sensing that something important had happened, even if she couldn't name it yet. Around them, the waiting room reacted in silence. Some people shifted in their seats. Others looked down, pretending nothing had changed. The unspoken rules had been disrupted, and no one quite knew how to respond. Sophia felt the shift too, though she kept her eyes forward. Being noticed was uncomfortable. Being acknowledged without judgment felt unfamiliar. As the minutes passed, Sophia realized her hands had stopped shaking. The floor no longer felt unsteady beneath her. She didn't feel better, not yet, but she felt less alone. All she had asked for was a simple favor. What she hadn't expected was how deeply that small act would settle into her chest, quietly changing the weight of the moment. As the minutes stretched on, Sophia's breathing began to change. It wasn't obvious at first, just a subtle shortening of each inhale, a careful control that suggested she was rationing air rather than breathing freely. Her lips pressed together, jaw tightening, as if she were holding something back. From the outside, she still looked composed, but the cracks were forming beneath the surface. Michael noticed them immediately, not out of curiosity, but recognition. He had learned long ago how fragile calm could be. He had seen that same look years earlier, during endless hospital nights with his late wife. The quiet struggle to stay functional while fear pressed in from every direction. The way strength became performance when weakness felt dangerous. Watching Sophia now, he recognized the same internal battle unfolding in silence. It stirred something heavy in his chest, a memory he rarely allowed himself to revisit. He shifted slightly, attentive without being intrusive, present without staring. Sophia adjusted in the chair, her fingers tightening around the folder in her lap. After a moment, she spoke again, her voice softer this time, less rehearsed. She apologized for taking the seat, insisting she could stand if he needed it back. Even as she said it, she began to rise, as if punishment were expected for the inconvenience she believed she had caused. The instinct to remove herself was immediate, automatic. Michael reacted without thinking. He gently shook his head and told her to stay seated. His voice was calm, steady, carrying no urgency or judgment. He reminded her that the seat was hers for as long as she needed it. The simplicity of the statement seemed to catch her off guard. She froze halfway up, then slowly sat back down, her shoulders slumping slightly, as if the effort to remain composed had finally exhausted her. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. The silence felt different now, heavier but more honest. Sophia stared at the floor, her grip loosening on the folder. When she finally spoke again, her voice dropped to a whisper, barely audible over the background noise of the waiting room. She confessed the truth she hadn't intended to share with anyone. She wasn't there for herself. She was waiting for news about her younger sister. Her sister had been rushed into emergency surgery only hours earlier. Sophia explained that she was the only family nearby, the one expected to stay calm, make decisions, hold everything together. Saying it out loud cracked something inside her. Her eyes filled, but she didn't let the tears fall. She had spent too many years believing that breaking down was a luxury she couldn't afford. Michael listened without interruption, his attention unwavering. He didn't rush to reassure her. He didn't offer hollow comfort. He simply let her speak, understanding that sometimes being heard was the only thing keeping someone upright. Emily watched quietly, sensing the gravity of the moment, instinctively staying still. As Sophia finished, she exhaled deeply, as though she had finally released a breath she had been holding since the morning began. The weight of her secret lingered between them, no longer hidden, no longer carried alone. The waiting room continued its low hum around them, unaware that something profoundly human had just been revealed in the space between two strangers. Sophia continued speaking in a low, steady voice, choosing each word carefully, as if afraid that saying too much might undo her completely. She explained that her younger sister had raised her after their parents were gone. From an early age, roles had been assigned without discussion. Her sister became the protector. Sophia became the one who didn't complicate things, the strong one, the calm one, the reliable one. Strength, for her, had never been a choice. It had been a requirement. She described how that role followed her into adulthood, at work, in relationships, in moments of crisis. She was the one people leaned on. She organized, reassured, solved problems. Falling apart was something she postponed indefinitely, convinced there would be time for it later. Sitting down in that chair felt like admitting she couldn't carry everything anymore. Asking a stranger for help felt even worse, like confessing weakness in a world that rewarded endurance. Her voice faltered for the first time when she admitted that today felt different. She could feel herself slipping, the control she had perfected beginning to fray. She had stood because standing felt safer than surrender. She had stayed silent because silence kept her intact. Saying any of this out loud felt dangerous, as though once she started, she might not be able to stop. The fear of that loss of control lingered in every pause between her sentences. Michael listened without interruption, his attention steady and unguarded. He didn't rush her. He didn't offer solutions. He understood that this wasn't a problem to fix, but a moment to hold. His presence carried no pressure, no expectation, just space. Sometimes he had learned attention without judgment was the most generous thing a person could offer. Emily, who had been quietly watching the exchange, made a decision of her own. Without hesitation, she reached out and gently placed her coloring pencil into Sophia's hand. The gesture was small, unplanned, and entirely sincere. Sophia looked down at the pencil, confused for a moment, then slowly curled her fingers around it as if it was something fragile. Something inside her cracked, not loudly, not dramatically, but enough. Her eyes filled as she swallowed hard, overwhelmed by the unexpected kindness of a child who asked nothing in return. The simplicity of the gesture bypassed all her defenses. It didn't ask her to be strong. It didn't require words. It simply acknowledged her presence. Sophia let out a shaky breath and smiled, a real smile that surprised even her. For the first time that day, she felt seen without being evaluated, supported without being managed. The weight she had been carrying alone shifted slightly, not gone, but shared, and that made it feel bearable. The waiting room remained unchanged around them. Names were called, people moved, time continued. But for Sophia, something fundamental had shifted. The secret she had hidden so well no longer felt like a burden she had to carry alone. In that quiet moment, she realized that strength didn't disappear when you accepted help. Sometimes it finally had room to breathe. When the nurse finally called a name, it wasn't Sophia's sister. It was Emily's. Michael stood immediately, instinctively reaching for his daughter's hand. For a brief second, Sophia's heart dropped, a familiar fear tightening in her chest as she assumed this was the moment their paths would separate. She nodded at him politely, already preparing herself to be alone again. Michael noticed the shift in her expression, subtle but unmistakable, the way hope recoiled before it had fully formed. Instead of walking away, Michael paused. He leaned slightly toward the nurse and asked a quiet question, careful not to draw attention. His tone was respectful, calm, the voice of someone who understood how fragile waiting could be. The nurse hesitated for a moment, checked a screen, then nodded. Michael thanked her softly. It took less than a minute. But to Sophia, watching from the chair, it felt like time had slowed to a standstill. Michael returned before leaving with Emily. He didn't sit. He simply looked at Sophia and spoke gently, as if delivering something precious. He told her that her sister had been moved into recovery, stable, alive. The words landed slowly, each one settling into Sophia's chest like warmth after a long cold. For a second, she didn't react at all, as if her body needed permission to believe what she had heard. Then her hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes filled instantly, tears spilling over before she could stop them. She nodded over and over, unable to speak. Relief rushed through her so suddenly it left her dizzy. She hadn't realized how tightly she'd been holding herself together until the pressure released. The room blurred, the noise faded. All she could feel was the overwhelming weight of not having to be strong anymore. Michael watched quietly, giving her space even in that moment. He didn't step closer. He didn't say anything else. He understood that this relief belonged to her. Emily squeezed his hand, sensing the importance of what had just happened. She smiled at Sophia, small and proud, as if they had all played a part in something meaningful. Sophia managed to whisper "thank you," though it felt insufficient. What he had done wasn't required. It wasn't expected. No one else in the room had thought to ask, to check, to care beyond their own concerns. Michael had seen her fear and responded without hesitation, not because it was his responsibility, but because it was within his reach. As Michael and Emily walked away with the nurse, Sophia remained seated, trembling softly as the reality settled in. She had arrived that day, prepared to endure the worst alone. Instead, she was left with proof that compassion still existed in ordinary places, offered by ordinary people who chose to pay attention. In that moment, Sophia understood something she hadn't allowed herself to feel before. She hadn't just been afraid of losing her sister. She had been afraid of facing it alone, and without realizing it, Michael had changed that. Not with grand words or promises, but with a simple act of human care that altered the weight of everything that came after. The atmosphere in the waiting room shifted in a way that was impossible to measure but easy to feel. Sophia's shoulders, which had been held tight for hours, finally lowered. Her breathing slowed, deeper now, less guarded. The tension that had wrapped itself around her posture loosened, as if her body had finally accepted that the worst moment had passed. The room was the same. Same chairs, same sounds. But her experience of it had changed completely. Sophia began to speak more freely, no longer choosing her words with fear. She talked about exhaustion, the kind that seeps into your bones when responsibility never takes a break. She admitted how tired she was of being the reliable one, the calm one, the person everyone depended on without ever checking how much it cost her. Saying it out loud felt strange, almost disloyal to the role she had lived inside for so long, yet deeply relieving. Michael listened, nodding occasionally, his attention steady. When he spoke, it wasn't to fix anything. He shared pieces of his own story carefully, honestly. He spoke about loss without dramatizing it, about the quiet loneliness of raising a child while carrying grief that never fully leaves. He didn't compare pain or offer lessons. He simply allowed his experience to sit beside hers, equal and unembellished. There were no cliches between them, no reassurances that everything happens for a reason, no empty promises that things would be fine. What passed between them was something far more grounding: recognition. The kind that comes when two people realize they are not explaining themselves, only being understood. Sophia felt it immediately, the rare comfort of not having to justify her fear or her fatigue. Emily, sensing the calm, shifted closer to Sophia and leaned gently against her arm. The contact was natural, unforced, as if it had always been that way. Sophia looked down in surprise, then smiled softly, resting her arm so the child could stay comfortable. The warmth of it caught her off guard. She hadn't realized how starved she was for simple human closeness. Around them, the waiting room continued its slow rhythm. Names were called, doors opened and closed, but the space no longer felt hostile or isolating. It felt shared, human. Sophia noticed other people laughing quietly, exchanging small words of comfort. Maybe it had always been there, she thought. Maybe she just hadn't been able to see it before. Michael watched Emily and Sophia together and felt something settle inside him. This was what he wanted his daughter to learn. Not fearlessness, but empathy. Not toughness, but awareness. Moments like this mattered more than lectures or rules. They were lessons lived, not taught. As time passed, Sophia realized that waiting no longer felt like punishment. It felt like pause, like space to breathe, to feel, to exist without performing strength. Whatever came next, she knew she would carry this moment with her, not because it erased her fear, but because it reminded her that even in the hardest places, connection could still quietly change everything. When the nurse finally called Sophia's name, her body responded before her thoughts did. She stood smoothly, without the hesitation that had defined her earlier movements. The fear was still there, but it no longer controlled her posture. She turned toward Michael and Emily, pausing as if she didn't want to rush the moment away. Gratitude sat heavy in her chest, deeper than words, demanding something more lasting than a simple goodbye. She hesitated, then asked Michael for his number. The request was careful, sincere. She made it clear it wasn't about romance or obligation. She didn't want the connection to vanish the moment she walked through the doors. Some moments, she explained quietly, mattered too much to be treated as temporary. Michael nodded, understanding immediately. He wrote it down without hesitation, the exchange simple and unceremonious. Emily hugged Sophia gently, the kind of hug that carried no conditions. Sophia returned it, surprised by how natural it felt. Then she turned and followed the nurse down the hallway, her steps steady, her shoulders squared. Michael watched her go, feeling the quiet weight of knowing that sometimes the most meaningful interactions were the briefest ones. He gathered Emily and prepared to leave, assuming the moment had ended there. Weeks passed. Life returned to its familiar pace. Work, school, dinners, routines. The hospital visit became just another memory filed away among many. Then one evening, Michael's phone vibrated with an unfamiliar number. The message was short, but it carried everything. Sophia wrote that her sister was recovering well, slowly, steadily, alive. The relief in her words was unmistakable. She thanked him again, not just for the chair, but for asking the question no one else thought to ask, for paying attention when it mattered, for offering calm instead of noise in a moment filled with fear. She wrote that his presence had changed how she experienced that day and how she viewed strength itself. Reading it, Michael felt a quiet ache in his chest, the kind that comes from realizing how close people pass to one another without knowing it. Michael sat with the message longer than necessary. He thought about how easily he could have stayed seated, kept his focus narrow, chosen convenience. Instead, he had chosen awareness. He hadn't saved a life or changed the world, but he had shifted someone's experience in a moment that would stay with her forever. That felt significant in a way that surprised him. Emily peeked over his shoulder, asking who the message was from. Michael told her simply that it was from someone who had needed help and was doing better now. Emily smiled, satisfied. To her, the meaning was obvious. Kindness didn't end when the moment passed. It carried forward. Sophia would go on to care for her sister, return to work, and resume the life she had temporarily set aside. But she carried something new with her, a quiet reminder that strength didn't require isolation, that asking for help wasn't weakness, and that sometimes an unbelievable gesture wasn't dramatic at all. It was simply choosing not to look away. Life did not transform overnight, and none of them expected it to. There were no dramatic reunions or sudden promises made, yet something subtle settled into place after that day, like a quiet echo that refused to fade. Michael returned to his routines with Emily, but he noticed how his attention lingered longer on people around him. Small gestures felt heavier with meaning, as if the waiting room had taught him that ordinary moments could carry unexpected weight when met with presence instead of distraction. Emily spoke about Sophia from time to time, usually without prompting. She didn't describe her as sad or scared, only as someone who needed to sit for a while. To Emily, the simplicity of that moment mattered more than the fear surrounding it. Michael realized that his daughter was learning something essential without lessons or explanations. She was learning that kindness didn't require permission, and that helping someone didn't need to be loud to be powerful. For Sophia, the days that followed were demanding. Hospital visits turned into home care, schedules tightened, and exhaustion became familiar again. But something had shifted inside her. She no longer equated strength with silence. When fatigue crept in, she allowed herself pauses. When fear returned, she named it. The memory of asking for that chair reminded her that needing support did not erase her resilience. It revealed it. She often replayed the moment in her mind, not with drama, but with clarity. The way Michael stood without hesitation, the calm in his voice, the child's quiet generosity. None of it was extraordinary on its own. Yet together, it had softened a day that could have broken her. She carried that awareness forward, noticing how many people around her were standing when they needed to sit, holding more than they should alone. Michael found himself more patient in public spaces. He waited differently now. Lines felt less irritating. Delays felt less personal. He remembered how much could be happening behind a composed expression. The waiting room no longer symbolized discomfort to him, but connection. It reminded him that life often asks nothing more than attention, and that empathy, when offered freely, could change the emotional direction of a stranger's day. They did not keep in constant contact. Messages were rare, respectful, and warm. Updates arrived when they mattered. Each one reinforced that the connection was real, not dependent on frequency. It existed because it had been earned in a moment of honesty. Michael appreciated that simplicity. It allowed the experience to remain meaningful without turning it into something it was never meant to be. Over time, the memory became less sharp, but never distant. It settled into each of them differently. For Emily, it became instinct. For Michael, a reminder. For Sophia, a permission she hadn't known she needed. None of them changed who they were completely, but all of them moved forward slightly more open than before. What stayed behind was not the chair or the clinic or even the words exchanged. It was the understanding that small favors could open doors quietly, without force. That asking didn't diminish dignity, and that sometimes the most lasting impact came from choosing not to look away when someone reached out, softly, briefly, and bravely.